Good evening, Resistors. Today is March 29th, and you're listening to the WideShut Webcast here on Resistance Radio. That's wideshut.co.uk and resistradio.com. Can you all hear me loud and clear? Because, as always, BTR is being a little bit iffy with me tonight. Just give me a little shout out in the chat if you can hear me okay. Usually a bit of a delay. The regulars are turning up, that's a good sign. Red, white and blue, Squint's in there, Cookie Monster. Yep, loud and clear, good stuff. Well, what a weekend it has been. For those living under a rock, Resistance Radio force during the London protest. I was there, Cookie was there, Lee Woodberg of the Evolution Show was there, Squintles, Vin was there. Oh, I'm going to have to list everybody now, I've started, haven't I? Red, White and Blue, UK was there. James, otherwise known as Captain Spaulding, was also there, and I'm probably missing some people, but there was also a couple of listeners. Sorry if I forget what your names were. You know how it is with internet usernames, you kind of don't always make the connection, but yep, there was quite a lot of Resistance Radio crew there, which was good to see. A couple of random people came up to me who recognized me from YouTube, which was a bit odd. Encouraging at the same time, but a bit odd to have people say, "Oh, I saw your film." It's like, what? So yeah, really great to meet everybody. Just to have those real life conversations with people that actually know what's going on. It's very encouraging, because sometimes you can sit online and chat away, but it can be very lonely, secluded. But it was really good to see a good bunch of people with the same kind of ideas. And I think this is the start of things to come. If we can get the same number of people out for future protests, if we can get Resistance Radio to continually represent, I think we can do some good things. We've got the Royal Wedding coming up. There's also the September 11th anniversary down the line, the end of fear, and I think if we can get everybody out there, we can have a real impact. I think planting those seeds of awakening within people. And I just want to give a big kudos, a big pat on the back to Squintles and James and Mike for all their megaphoning. As I say, the seeds were being planted. And it wasn't Alex Jones style, you know, there was no aggression. It was just the facts. It was relevant questions, getting people to stop and think about what they're doing and why they're there. You know, it was all done in good humour and good sarcasm. I mean, you don't need to berate people or shout right in their faces. And I think we all did a good job on that front. Especially, as I say, Squint, James and Mike, good stuff. And I've got some of that footage on YouTube now, on my YouTube channel. I'll paste the link in. There's about 30 minutes on there, from the morning all the way through until the evening in Hyde Park. I'll just paste that into the chat. There we go. If you haven't checked that out, bookmark it for later or watch it now if you want to ignore me now. Yeah, so a brilliant day. I also want to give a big thank you to Cookie, who again did a brilliant job of waking people up, just by conversing in a polite manner, just offering that information out there. Me, Vin and Cookie ended up at the nighttime quote-unquote occupation of Hyde Park, and it was basically just sitting by the fire, having a good old chinwag, spreading the information to other people that might not have been as aware of it as we are. me and Cookie had an interesting conversation about Charlie Veitch. Not so much against what he's doing necessarily. I'm a big supporter of the Love Police, but you can definitely see that cult of personality around him, and you get that with all popular figures, that hardcore contingent of supporters that tend to hang on their every word, no longer think critically, and you see that in YouTube comments. The same with Alex Jones. You can't criticize the leader without certain people wrapped up in this cult of personality coming out and attacking you, even if you do it in a polite manner. So we were just sort of having a chat about the rise of Charlie Veitch and how he's going to have to deal with this hardcore group of followers, and how he's going to have to deal with the fame. And I kind of made the point that if there wasn't an internet, if there wasn't people filming him all the time, would he still be doing what he's doing, and would he still be getting that inner gratification from it? I ask myself the same question sometimes. When I've put a video up on YouTube, every couple of minutes I'll check back to see if the view count's gone up, or if there's new comments. And, you have to ask yourself these questions. Am I really trying to affect change, or is this an ego thing? It's definitely worth a ponder. So yeah, some very thought-provoking things coming from our bearded master Cookie around the hippie fire of truth in Hyde Park on Saturday evening. There was one student from Newcastle, I believe it was Newcastle, might be somewhere else, probably only about my own age or maybe a bit younger, but he had a very mainstream view of the world. And in the space of a couple of hours, Cookie just broke down the whole system to this guy. The history, the banks, the illusion of democracy, the real reasons behind all the wars. And there's no doubt in my mind that guy is going to go and research this information. There was also a pair of possibly foreign students, or they were definitely foreign anyway. But again, Cookie was just laying it all out there, and you could tell these guys in particular understood to a degree already, but Cookie was just connecting those dots, and you could see it all coming together for them. So yeah, just kudos to everybody that was there. It wasn't a revolution, but it was definitely a day of solidarity. It was the coming together of like-minded people. There really is a lot of us out there. We just have to come together on these occasions. We're all dotted all over the place, and we all know each other from the internet, and lots of people put out videos and have websites, and there is a lot of us out there. It's just getting us together at events like this to really start spreading the word. There were people with chemtrail signs, resist the New World Order signs, 9/11 inside job hoodies. Just great to see all these people out there. And if we can all keep meeting up and planting those seeds, the message is definitely going to spread. And I think that sort of approach, that human, down-to-earth approach of offering the information, is a somewhat better approach than what we got with the anarchists. And I can understand why the real anarchists were doing what they were doing, smashing banks, targeting the big businesses. I think in a sane world, if everybody really understood what was going on, everybody would be that angry. That's almost the natural human reaction to what's happened to everybody, to the rape of our wealth by the banks and this global control system. Lashing out is almost a natural reaction. But after being there, I didn't actually see the violence. I somehow missed all of it. But after being there and seeing the unions and the labour heads, I've come to a conclusion that not enough of the general public truly understand why we're in this mess. and therefore they can't understand the reasons why the anarchists were causing all that violence and damage to businesses and banks and such. And then the media take a superficial approach to that violence, and we have a situation where anarchists that believe in responsible living and self-governance, who don't want a ruling elite using their crony capitalism and private banks to control that ideology that makes perfect sense because of the media. That ideology simply becomes, oh, they're just violent thugs who just wanted an excuse to smash things. And the media know exactly what they want to focus on. Nobody came to Hyde Park when we were, peacefully sitting around a fire having a chat. But you look at some of this footage, and you've got like 15 mainstream media cameramen surrounding one anarchist at a time as they're doing some kind of damage somewhere. The ratio of coverage is quite appalling, really. It's headline sensationalism. And obviously, we can't trust the media to get to the real issues. So the average person is never really going to understand why this violence is happening. There's probably a few provocateurs. There's some videos on the internet of plainclothes policemen, maybe inciting some of it, I'm not sure. But don't be naive. There are real anarchists out there. Anarchism is a proper, well-established sort of ideology, and I can fully relate to what they're trying to do. It's not necessarily the route I'm going to take, but I have somewhat support for it. And what I found interesting is the day before, there was this article that came out that quoted Andy Heyman, I think that's his name, a former anti-terrorism head, and he's a complete scumbag. He was there sort of leading some of the stuff into the 7/7 attacks, so he was responsible for concealing certain information. He was actually found guilty of perverting some of the information regarding the shooting of John Charles de Mendez, who got shot 9 times in the head, and they lied that he jumped the ticket barrier, and they lied that he was running, and all that kind of thing. And this guy, Andy Heyman, he was actually disgraced. He got done for some kind of sexual assault in the workplace, and some other thing that escapes me. But this guy still gets quoted by the media. He's become some kind of columnist for one of the newspapers. And before the protest, he was talking about how there was going to be extremist groups and all this kind of thing. And there was going to be violence and the police aren't going to do enough. It's almost like they set this whole thing up so they can bring in more of this heavy policing. But going back to what I was saying, actually, I'll just check the chat again. All good, no sound problems. Okay, anyway. Back to what I was saying. If the public don't understand the control system, and then the media condemns the violence against these businesses and banks, in effect, it closes off more people's minds than it opens. The violence, this action, it closes off more people's minds than it actually opens. We don't yet have enough numbers for violence to work. We're not at that tipping point, and there's the debate that violence will never work. I've not really got a conclusion on that yet, but I'm just making the point that the anarchists are probably self-defeating, if you get what I'm saying. We're not at that tipping point where enough people understand, so when they see the violence, the average person sees that violence, it closes them off because the media have hot button headlines. What we get instead is a divide and rule situation. We have to remember that the day itself was mainly set up by the unions and by the Labour supporters within the mainstream political paradigm, and the violent anarchism, if anything, strengthened the position of those people, because their talking heads, the union leaders and the labour leaders, come out and condemn the violence, and this notion gets drilled into them that they were the good guys having the peaceful democratic march, and the anarchists and everybody else that were just doing their own thing, they were the ones ruining it. And if I remember rightly, Squint and James were just doing their own peaceful sort of megaphoning, and one lady was calling them totters, saying that they're ruining it for them. So there's this blind mentality that some of the mainline protesters had, that anybody who wasn't part of the main march with the unions were anarchists or were disruptors. And I think these are the main people we need to reach, the people still stuck in that false party paradigm. What these labour union people don't understand is that they're still being played by the bankers. The very people that they're marching in support of are still controlled by the bankers. It's not an alternative, it's still the same. The Conservative and Lib Dem coalition are for fast and deep cuts. So Labour play the false opposition and are for slower cuts. But they're still talking about cuts, and they're still working within the private banking system. But these average people on the march, they think that the Labour and the unions and all that are the only solution. But the elephant in the living room is that the bankers are still in control. They still have the power to issue currency digitally out of thin air through the fractional reserve system. The government still has to borrow from the private bankers with interest. The bankers are still free to gamble with our money through derivatives and the stock market and all these dodgy loans. Nothing's changed, and neither party, neither side of the political paradigm are doing anything to reform the banking system. So it's quite clear, and all of you I know understand this, that the banks are still in control, and it doesn't matter what you vote for, they're still answering to the banks. And I say it again and again, but it's the main point. The full national debt figure is 4.8 trillion. That can't ever be paid back. And if we cut the yearly deficit to the point of turning a positive figure, which is still virtually impossible because of the exponential interest on the national debt. But if we do manage to cut it down, the deficit, the yearly deficit, we'll be in debt poverty for decades. And at the end of it all, the bankers are still in control and can still do it all over again, and probably will do. We're bankrupt. The debt needs to be nulled. That's really the only option. I haven't got a clear answer, but I believe we need to take the private banking monopoly and return it to the people. And I just hope we can reach enough people with the truth about what's going on before they go and vote Labour back in. And remember, Labour were the biggest borrowers of the money in the first place. It's ridiculous how short of a memory these people have. But it's the media shaping their opinions. And I've mentioned this a few times, and I was talking about it on Saturday also with some people. We could end up with a three-way coalition, Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative, and that will literally be the end of democracy if we haven't got the end of democracy already. Depends how you look at it. You know, some people are hoping can still get in, that sort of thing. There is that option. I think it's still somewhat open, but it's just about waking people up. But if we do get a three-way coalition, it literally is, it's just a dictatorship, because they don't disagree on any of the major issues. They're all pro-Europe, they're all pro-globalization, they all still support the current banking system, as I've just said, and they're all pro-carbon taxes and global warming. They all support the invasion of Libya. You know, there's no sign of repealing the police state. They're all the same. But yeah, it's never been more important to wake people up to the illusion of party politics. At least hundreds of thousands of people were and are willing to get out on the streets for what they think they believe in or what they've been told to believe in, but we now need to wake them up to the real control system. And I think if we keep attending these protests with the same spirit that we had on Saturday, we can continue to plant those seeds. I'll just jump over to the chat again, see what everybody's talking about. Yep, sounds still good, I guess. And anyway, the day itself, I guess I could give you a bit of a rundown of what happened. I got to Trafalgar Square at about 9:30, I want to say. It might have been earlier, it might have been later, I can't really remember. But I was the first person there, and then Vin turned up. Vince and Ebb, regular listener of the show. Had a bit of a chat, and then eventually everybody else made their way there. We met under, funnily enough, the big Zion London Olympic sign. And there was a little bit of synchronicity there. When I filmed the sign, you know, I was just sort of filming about, and I filmed the sign, and when I replayed the footage, the time on it was dead on. Well, it must have been earlier, because the time was, it said on it 11 minutes past 9, as in 9/11. And I wasn't aware that that was on the sign when I was filming it. If you check my footage, I had to slow it down to catch it. But just one of those interesting synchronicities. Was it Zion that caused 9/11? What does Zion even mean? But you know, that's for another show. But just one of those interesting things. Then we started to get onto the bullhorns to shout a few things. And we were a little bit apprehensive to start with, and one old lady came over and basically showed us how it was done. She got on the megaphone and screamed a few things, which was funny. There's some footage of that on there. Then there was the Morris dancers, of course. What were they? The Morris Liberation Front, which was pretty funny to see. Private security actually tried to stop them from dancing in the middle of London, as if it was some kind of crime. You're not allowed to dance in London. Some kind of rule that there's not allowed to be any entertainment. You're not allowed to be entertained in London. This is the city of London. This is for shopping and banking. But you know, they ignored them anyway. We got over there and started filming it. Everyone was cheering them on, and the spirit of resistance, they continued to Morris dance anyway. That's also in my footage if you want to check that out. I'll just take a sip of water. My throat's still sore from sitting around the bonfire all night. But yeah, obviously there was a big police presence, a lot of surveillance. They had helicopters in the sky monitoring everybody from above, and it seemed to me that they were sort of, the helicopters were keeping tabs on the different groups of people moving about the city, and obviously then relaying it to the police on the ground so they could sort of keep up with everybody. When we were in Hyde Park, a helicopter circled us for a few hours in the night, you know, just keeping tabs on what we were doing. We were obviously, there weren't many people there, I don't think it was a big issue. But, you know, they've got to keep surveillance on everybody. So what seemed to be rooftop surveillance. It was either news or rooftop surveillance. I know at the G20, they had high-powered cameras from the rooftops that could zoom in on individual people's faces. They had that in Canada. And from what I can gather, the idea is to basically identify everybody that attends these protests, get everybody's face and build like a big database of regular protesters, so they can, in future, you know, sort of get to certain areas faster, because they already have the faces and know who's about and what's going to happen. And that's why they were being so strict in telling people to remove their bandanas and balaclavas and things like that. If you check YouTube, Charlie Veitch at one point, I think towards the end of the evening, he was actually tackled and forced to take off his balaclava. So, you know, that was quite an interesting video. And of course, the headlines are now reporting that the police are to be given extra powers to enforce that people show their faces. And lots of people have said, well, maybe we should go there in burqas and sort of protest it religiously and sort of expose how farcical it is that people have to show their faces. I mean, if you're a protester, then you're now automatically photoed and databased. And what annoys me is the old line that, well, if you've got nothing to hide, then, you know, you won't mind. But that's not the point. Civil liberties are civil liberties. We all have a right to freedom. And what this does is allow police to have forward intelligence, and then they're going to crack down on the lawful right to protest. That's the point. That's why people don't want to be monitored so closely, because it prevents them from doing what they should be lawfully allowed to do anyway. You know, protests are protests, okay? And we're allowed to protest, and we're allowed to have them spontaneously, and we're allowed to have them wherever we want. You don't have to inform the police beforehand. You don't have to get permission. Lawful protest is lawful protest. That is part of freedom and democracy. As long as you're not running up to somebody with a megaphone right in their face, screaming at them, as long as you're not trying to fight anybody, then you can protest wherever the hell you like. That's free speech. And this forward intelligence is going to keep that police presence on people, and it's really removing that right to protest. It's full of things like, you know, well, the idea that people are ruining it for the TUC that were marching, the unions. Well, the unions don't have the sole right to protest. People are allowed to do whatever the hell they want. That's free speech. And the other issue is that the police aren't on our side. They're not there to keep the peace, and they're not there to enforce the right to lawful protest. As we saw with Trafalgar Square in the evening, me and Cookie and Vin, we sort of missed all that, but Squintles was in the thick of it. I think James caught a little of it. Mike was there as well, and it was practically instigated by the police. They were the ones that caused the problems. It was just a group of people having a bit of fun. So we're drinking. It's not illegal to drink. You know, so what if there's lots of people? What's the problem? They weren't doing anything bad. And I think Cookie brought this up to me. What is a kettle? Well, a kettle boils water. So practically, within their words, they're admitting that kettling is a tactic to boil up anger until the people get violent. then the police can attack and dissolve the protest. And if you look back at all these incidents, it seems like that's the idea. We're going to circle you, we're going to roll you up, we're going to piss you off, we're going to keep you here for a long time until you get agitated and angry. And as soon as one person starts getting a bit violent, a bit, I'm ready to try and push my way out. As soon as one person does that, or one person throws a bottle, then they charge. Everybody gets beaten up. Women, people battered around the head. And, they're like, go back, push back. Well, you just circled us. There's nowhere to go. It's the most ridiculous tactic. I mean, if you view the police as, a force for freedom or, protecting the streets or whatever, then how can you see kettling as a good tactic? It's not. It's blindingly obvious that it's there to cause unrest. And it's just crazy. That's the way it is. What else did I want to cover? There was something quite important I wanted to mention. Vin. As I said, Vin, one of our loyal listeners, was with us, and he actually decided to stay at Hyde Park with a group of other people, a smaller group. A lot of us left in the morning, but Vin stayed for this occupation. There was a few hundred of us over the night. Of course, the unions had long gone. They went back for their tea after their little march, just in time for dancing on ice. But yeah, me, Cookie, and Vin, and then Squint turned up later after being kettled, after the Trafalgar Square stuff. But we all stayed overnight in Hyde Park. And one point worth mentioning actually is that the unions and the people on this giant march like to talk about the costs of the cleanup after the anarchists, but in fact Hyde Park was covered in all of the union signs and placards that they just left all over the place. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a contradiction there. If they want to moan about the cleanup operation, well, they left just as much mess. And basically, to keep ourselves warm, we were burning all of their signs that they left. And then we acquired, shall we say, Vin acquired some more wood, but we won't go any more into that. But yeah, what was I saying? Vin, yeah, he stayed through to the next day with about 20 or so other people, and I believe police came down. They had sniffer dogs, probably for the the hippies and their drugs, and I think he was with some of the free men, and they planned to occupy Hyde Park until the royal wedding. But last I heard, they were actually booted out. A guy named Dom, who you may know from some of Danny Allen's videos, he was arrested. But as for Vin, the last I heard about Vin, he was in a squat with some anarchists nearby. He went squatting with some anarchists, which is interesting indeed. He said he was going to get some footage of that and stuff, so good luck to him. Kudos for sticking with it, and I hope he remains safe. And if he does get some filming, it should give us an interesting perspective on things. I hope he interviews some of these people. But I actually met Vin first thing in the morning, and he let me know that the night before he'd been staying with some homeless people, trying to gain their confidence, and he was going to sort of make a mini documentary about the homeless situation in London, about how the on and abuse them and things like that. So yeah, good guy. I hope all goes well for him. and I hope you can all send words of encouragement to him on Facebook and YouTube. He has been going to like an internet cafe or a McDonald's or something to get on the internet. I checked the chat. He's not actually listening, is he? No. But yeah, good guy. I'm glad he's a listener and part of the resistance. Respect to Vin. What else was I going to mention? Yeah, I got some posters through the post today. I don't know if you have my Facebook, but I posted them on my Facebook, the designs. I've designed some posters for Resistance Radio that I'm going to put up in the freezing shed of truth. If you see some of my videos, a Johnny Cash poster on my door, which usually gets in the background of the videos, and I thought it might be interesting to replace that with almost like a proper background poster, you know, with the show name and Resistance Radio and all that kind of thing, just to snazz it up a little bit in videos. And I've got two posters, one for each side of the room, so I'm going to get two different camera angles when I do videos in the future. I do have the green screen, but I've barely used it. It's a bit of a hassle to edit properly. It's not that good because I don't have good lighting in the office, in the shed. So I'm not going to bother with the green screen, but I'm just going to put up these sort of these posters. And I've also contemplated buying just a little, you know, on-air light, a sort of fake on-air light, just to give it a bit of a studio feel, so it'll look nice in the background of videos. What else I wanted to touch on actually was the census. If you check the video I did from Saturday, you'll notice that I did indeed burn my census. I called it No Contract Return to Nature. And I had a few chats with a few people who saw my sign which said Census Kills. The census kills. Thanks to Red, White and Blue for printing that out. The other side it had the illusion of democracy. And actually I want to apologise to the Lawful Rebellion guy who tried to get me to hand out some census leaflets. I probably should have helped him out, but I was enjoying myself and I didn't really want to traipse about handing out leaflets. Maybe next time, but yeah, the census. For me, it's a very black and white issue, and that's just how I tried to explain it to these couple of people that came up and asked, what's the census? Why does it kill? What the hell are you on about? Well, it's very simple. It's a question of morals. I don't care about the law. People can come at me and say, but the law. Well, I don't care. And I don't care what other people think. My personal humanity tells me that filling out that form is immoral. And that's why it went up in flames on Saturday. It's simple. Lockheed Martin, America's largest arms company, got £150 million to help run the census. They're the epitome of the military-industrial complex. And what I said to this girl who was outside, well, me and Red had gone to get a drink from a shop, and she came up to me. What I just tried to spell out to her is that Lockheed Martin make things that kill human beings. It's as simple as that. I don't care if Lockheed Martin won't personally have access to the data, although they might. You know, you never can tell with data security. Britain's got a long track record of leaving things on trains or whatever so people can steal the data. I don't care if they subcontracted it out to smaller companies. The point is, Lockheed Martin got £150 million, which means if you take part, if you fill in that form, you're supporting the killing of other human beings. It's that simple. It's very black and white. And Lockheed Martin, I did a little Google the other day, and they actually have sold planes to Gaddafi. So they're basically playing off both sides of this Libya conflict. You know, the next country we have to save because evil Gaddafi is supposedly harming his own people. Oh, we have to harm those people anyway. And we might take a bit of their oil for BP at the same time. And here's a headline that was out today. Rebels seize control of Libya's oil fields. What a surprise. It's not about human rights. It's about the corporate expansion of the New World Order. And Lockheed Martin are right there skimming profits of both sides. It's a con. And then you might go, well, oh, the census is important. It helps the government allocate vital public services. What public services? They're all being cut. That's why hundreds of thousands of people turned up to the protest. There's no money for public services. The government has made us 4.8 trillion in debt. Where do they get the money for these public services? There's no money. Well, as we know, they have to borrow it from the private financial sector. The same people that caused the recession in the first place, the same people we were forced to bail out, that added debt onto the national debt. It's a vicious cycle with the people at the bottom of the pyramid and the bankers at the top. Oh, but Labour got us into this mess. It's all Labour's fault. Well, what exactly has David Cameron done to prevent the bankers from continuing the scam? Nothing. All mainstream politicians are bought and paid for, and that's what we need to get across to people. Before he was elected, if you were a rich businessman, you could pay £50,000 to have dinner with David Cameron. £50,000. And I'm pretty sure they weren't just having a nice chat over a steak. If you pay £50,000 in campaign contributions to have a meal with the future Prime Minister, you're going to be talking about policy. The corporate New World Order system has control over our politicians. It's blindingly obvious. It's even more obvious in America with all their giant lobbying firms, but a lot of people still don't understand it. How many of you have had dinner with David Cameron? How many of us were on Nathaniel Rothschild's, how many of us were at his Corfu mansion when they wrote The Digital Economy? When Life peer Peter Mandelson, who's not even elected, and record label boss David Geffen were with a Rothschild writing a bill in a democratic system. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I bet a lot of you this year were coerced into paying tax. I know I was. And for a lot of you, it comes straight out the paycheck anyway, so you haven't got an option to not pay it. Well, guess what? If you're a Sir, and if you're buddies with George Osborne, it doesn't matter if you don't pay tax. It doesn't matter if you don't pay any tax on a record 1.2 billion bonus like Sir Philip Green of the Arcadia Group, because you get given the role of advising on spending. It's ridiculous. Sir Philip Green, the biggest tax evader in this country, was given the task to write a report on government spending. You can't make it up. The foxes are in charge of the hen house. And on Saturday, we followed the Love Police to a boot store, which they had to shut down for, well, to be honest, I'm not sure how effective it actually was, because we weren't there long. Maybe some people stayed, I'm not sure, but, you know, they shut it, and I guess they open it up again afterwards. But, you know, that's the whole UK Uncut thing. target the tax evaders, because they do have a strong point. I mean, I've said this before, I don't agree with the whole system. And tax is part of that system. I don't necessarily think we should pay tax. But at least in the average person's mind, the UK Uncut movement can point out some of the problems with the system, some of the contradictions and the double standards. So the average person goes, hang on a minute, why are we forced to pay tax, but these rich people are getting away with it? And then when they understand that, then they'll be more receptive to the idea of fractional reserve banking and the financial system as a whole, and then you can get into the control system itself. It's kind of a stepping stone. That's the way I see it. So I don't necessarily... well, I've made this point before. I support UK Uncut, but I personally go further than what they're saying. But they're a good stepping stone, and they're good at reaching the average person. It really is time for the people to start waking up, and it's time for us to help them out, as we were on Saturday. We're at a very important crossroads, and you can take two choices. You can fill out your census, you can bend over a little bit more to the bankers, you can let them rape you a little bit more, you can go through the austerity, you can turn a blind eye to illegal wars like Libya, like happened in Iraq, like's going to continue to happen all throughout the Middle East. You can continue giving up your freedoms under false flag terror, and you can continue, quite frankly, down the road of global slavery, because that's the way it's headed. Our governments are corrupt. Most other governments are corrupt. So if you have corrupt governments leading us into a globalized, centralized world, do you think it's going to be all pretty at the end of it? Of course it's not. It's just going to be a corrupt global system, which will be 20 billion times worse than it is right now. I was debating on YouTube about this whole thing. There was a video about Ed Miliband and how his speech somehow spurred on the anarchists, and this blogger was trying to make the link between what they were doing and what the anarchists were doing, and I was trying to make the point that, look, don't bring Ed Miliband into this. Ed Miliband doesn't represent the people. He's just controlled opposition, and he's certainly not any way linked to the anarchists. Don't give the man credibility. And I started getting into a debate with this person about the banking system, about what's going on. And they were all like, but the people took out their loans, and don't you think that we need to have these cuts to pay off the deficit? And I kind of went through all the things, and they were somewhat receptive to it. I think they understood where I was going, but then we reached a point where the only thing left he could say was, oh, I think you've got some nice ideas, but I think you're getting into conspiracy theories. And it is so infuriating, that term, conspiracy theory. It just shuts down debate. But to people that understand, there's such a disconnect between people that understand and people that are still in the paradigm. The New World Order is blindingly obvious. You could go to any different example. Iraq. Well, look at Blackwater. Look at all the profits in the corporate expansion. Look at Tony Blair calling for a new world order before he invaded. Look at Tony Blair now making profits with bankers and oil deals made off of the war that he illegally started. It's blindingly obvious, but there's this disconnect that you go so far and people hit that brick wall. And we need to start educating people like we were on Saturday. It's not bullhorning people in the face. It's not getting angry and having, violent debates and where people just go off in a huff because you just bruised each other's egos. It's about offering the information, giving it to them, and if they don't want it, if they don't want the information, that's their own problem. I've said this before. The people that are awake, it's our duty to try and wake other people up. And I think it almost comes down to the meaning of life. As long as we don't have to win, but we're on the right side. And I think I've made this point before. The people that don't want to know this information, it's because they're still comfortable. They've still got their cars. They've still got their houses. They've still got their middle-class jobs. People only learn from their experiences. And I think a lot of people are going to have to experience a lot worse than they're experiencing now to fully understand what's going on. And there's no need to get angry at them people. There's no need to have an angry argument. I made a video about arguing is an ego-driven thing. We're not here to win arguments. We're here to help and educate people. And when shit hits the fan, we'll be here to educate them when they need us. So that kind of wraps me up for today. Meeting everybody at the weekend, it's almost reinvigorated the mission for me. And I hope you can all join us again and again and again as we continue to spread the awareness. You are the resistance. And that's not an empty term, Some of us are good at spreading info online. I think that's more my forte. Some of us are good at megaphoning. Some of us are good at conversing on a human level, like Cookie. But we are the resistance. And I think we can win this thing going forward. So, I've been Keelan Balderson. This was the WideShut Webcast. I'll see you same time, same place next week. And of course, be sure to check out Cookie in half an hour with the Rabbit Hole Orientation Show, which will no doubt be very interesting with some of his thoughts from the protest and some of the things he wants to reflect on from that. But that's me, folks. I'm going to say goodbye for this week.